Right there.
Should come as no surprise that I'm talking about drones today at the drone demonstration. It's springtime. So I did this because we seem to forget that everybody wants to talk about queens. They want to talk about how you get queens, why you have queens. Nobody wants to talk about drones. I like genetics, so I thought this was something I could talk about. How do we change the slides?
Hold on 1 second.
Start that again.
Well, while he's getting that set up, I've got a question for you.
Okay.
So one of our members did split,
Okay.
put a Johnny Thompson queen in there, and almost immediately she started raising drones. Is that a method to ensure reproduction because she can't swarm?
I think it's a method to ensure reproduction for sure, but it doesn't mean she can't swarm.
Or, well, she's got nothing to swarm with, but,
Right.
you know.
Drone production is not a bad thing.
Well, and I understand that, but is that a typical occurrence?
Nothing is typical of beekeeping.
Is that typical
Where do you
occurrence?
stand?
With,
Is there no microphone? Can you,
Yeah, stand right there, but good.
how's that?
much better?
I walk around a lot, so that's gonna be a problem. Carry the podium bigger than I am.
All you got is the bottom.
Back and forth, thanks.
Bottom.
I didn't touch anything.
You got to point it towards the computer.
It did.
Okay.
It's the opposite of what you think it should be. Okay, you good to go.
If you don't know that's a drone, we need to start right there. We need to stop everything. If anybody doesn't know that's a drone, raise your hand and we'll talk about that. Okay. First day, right?
Yes.
First day, okay. We can go into more specifics about which one's the queen, which one's the worker, which one is the drone. But for the purpose of this conversation, we'll talk about that the drones are the only male beings in the hive.
When I said I had 0 experience, that's that.
Okay. Queen and the workers are female. So we're going to be talking about drones. So obviously, I'll talk to you then, since you raised your hand. The laser work?
I don't think so.
Okay. Most everyone knows on the right side, you guys recognize the good brood, the standard brood. Nathan's shaking his head, you know. Does anybody know what drone brood looks like on the left side? Is this new to anybody? Okay. So notice the smaller ones on the right, those are worker cells.
Okay.
And notice the larger ones, not only are they bigger around, but they stick out for, can't see it as well here. But this is definitely drones, and that's definitely workers on that side. Make sense?
You could look at the dividing line right there, is drum sales, it's actually in with the worker sales right there at the top.
Mhm.
Not more, yeah. It's the same color as the, yeah,
So she probably laid that one
first, yeah.
first. She probably laid that one first and moved in that direction. So we're going to talk about some vocabulary. So the genotype is the actual DNA for the bee. So you know genotype. Okay, so you got something. Yeah, something that's good. You guys have heard genes before, so we're familiar with that. Phenotype is the actual traits that are expressed. In other words, if the bee is darker in color, if the bee is lighter in color, if the bee has certain behaviors, these are phenotypes. Talk about specifically hygienic behavior. People talk about something else we might talk about. Good brood production in a queen. Good honey production. Maybe somebody's talking to you and they say, oh, I have a queen that has really good honey production. That's a phenotype. That's a trait that's expressed that you can identify. Any questions with that, about that? Haploid and diploid. Haploid cells are a single set of chromosomes. Drones are a single set of chromosomes. As opposed to diploid, workers and queens, they have two sets of chromosomes. They have a mother and they have a father. All of you have two sets of chromosomes, one from your mother and one from your father, as opposed to a drone that only has all of its DNA from its mother. Does that make sense? That's a little bit unusual for mammals. It's not the same for us, but in bees, that's how that works. It's important to understand it because that means that all of your drones can only be one of two types from the queen. There's only two options for her drones. So the queens, I wish Ron was here because Ron was the first person that told me that queens have or drones have a grandfather, but they don't have a father. And chew on that one for a little bit. Because of their genetic makeup, they have a grandfather, but they do not have a father. The queen lays an unfertilized egg that will become a drone. Make sense? Any questions about that? This is the life cycle of a drone versus the life cycle of a queen and the life cycle, I'm sorry, how long it takes for them to reach maturity. We start at the top. You can see that it takes 37 days before the drone is ready to mate. That's important because if you're trying to raise queens, you can't start your queens at the same time that you're starting your drone cells and hoping that they're going to line up. Because if you notice, the queen emerges on day 16 and then she's ready for mating on day 20. So if your queens are ready to go on day 20 and your drones are not caught up, you're not going to have any drones to mate with, right? All these charts are going to be available if anybody wants. This is all public knowledge. It's all out there. I didn't make any of this stuff up. So if anybody thinks that I came up with some crazy formula or something, I didn't do that. Any questions about any of these specifically?
How are you supposed to match them up if you can't?
The important thing for drone production is to get the drones out as early as possible. And also don't make splits and don't try to make new queen cells if you don't have the drones ready and available in your area. I've made that mistake before, trying to get, everybody wants to start earlier than the guy down the street. So we always try to get our queens out faster than somebody else, but you can't rush it. Yes, ma'am.
Isn't it true that a drone from the hive will mate with the queen from the hive? It's usually drones from other hives.
It's usually, but it's very difficult to prove that. So with as many drones flying in as many different directions, there are, it can be very difficult. We'll talk a little bit about drone congregation areas and some basics on that. But primarily, once the drone gets old enough that it can see, that it can fly, it's going to leave, and the odds of it finding a queen that's from its own colony are relatively low. But the point that I'm making is also that if your drones are not ready, then the drones down the street are not ready as well. So that's kind of the idea to keep it in mind. And also, yes, Nick.
How long does a drone live? Well, say it's 20 years, it doesn't make.
If it doesn't make, there's no specific information as far as how long it can live. As far as that goes, if a colony is healthy and it can fly back home, it can make its way back home without getting picked off by a bird, then it can be fed again and maybe fly again tomorrow and just keep flying until it's, until it does its job or loses its life in the process. There's just not, unfortunately, there's just no good way to be able to say that these drones lasted this long. We keep them in, I can keep them in that tube and they'll last for a while as long as I keep feeding them. Any other questions on this? This goes back to your question about when we get the queens out versus when we get the drones out. So these photos here, this actually came from Ron last year. He was asking, we were talking about when the drones were going to be ready versus when the queens are going to be ready. So you can actually, if you have a lot of drone cells, you can actually take something and you can open up one of the cells and you can look at the drone and you can use this scale to determine how old the drone is. So you know that the drone is 10 days old, 15 days old. So, yes.
So that open cell won't harm the drone?
Oh, the drone's dead, but you got 50,000 of them sitting next to it. So, yeah, no, you have to sacrifice some to save others. But yeah, so you're gonna pull out 2 or 3 and see how, kind of get a sample. And believe me, they're, in the spring, they're everywhere. But yes, this gives you a gauge for how long that they're gonna have. This is where we talk about, I know that there was some funny looks when I mentioned that the queen can only have 2 different drone offspring. So you'll see here, the queen has 2 alleles, and so she can pass 16 chromosomes to, in this example, the pink drone, drone A, and she could pass 16 chromosomes to the drone, example, drone B. So these are the only 2 possible choices, it's not even choices, but these are the only 2 offspring choices that she can make. Does that make sense? Either, so every time she lays a drone egg, it's a 50-50 chance that it's gonna be A1 and 50-50 chance that it's gonna be A2. So these are just the limit to her drone offspring. Now there can be, if there's 100 hives out, there can be multiple different types of drones that are coming out. So they can all have different genotypes and phenotypes in that yard. But this queen in this example, she can only produce those 2 types of drones.
What's the rule for one and two?
Because
No, I mean, like in real life, is there a one you want, one you don't want, or does it really matter?
not necessarily, if it's important just to understand that if she is going to lay eggs, that she can only produce 2 different types of drones. Because in a minute, we're gonna talk about, she's gonna make with multiple different drones.
Okay, so she has 32 chromosomes, she only gives half of it to the drone.
Right, because it's a
So
haploid
that's
cell.
why you could have.
Yeah.
Like I noticed in the spring of the year, I had some black drones, and then I had some yellow drones.
Right. It's also possible that they could have been from different hives as well, the blonde color. And again, that color is a phenotype. Is it a darker color? Is it a lighter color? But the point to your question is that she can only produce 2 different types of drones. It's possible that one of those 2, that we'll call it the grandfather, was not a good drone. He could have, come from aggressive stock or something like that. And so maybe you don't breed that queen because you notice those traits. But obviously, if you have a hive that is aggressive, then I wouldn't recommend breeding that hive anyway, unless there was another trait that was more important. And then that's where we can talk about techniques to breed those down. But the important thing to understand here is that the queen has 2 sets of 16 chromosomes, so she can only produce 2 different male offspring choices. She doesn't get to pick either, I keep saying choices. Any questions about that? Now, in this example, the queen, and again, this is our same queen, and she only has 2 possible offspring. And these are 5 other drone possibilities. So now if she only mates with these 5 drones, we have 10 possible queen offspring from her. That makes everybody follow along so far? It's important to understand that the queen can mate with what, 20 or 30 drones, depending on the study that you see and how many drones are available. But I limited it to the 5 so that it's not too complex. But the point is that you can see how important having multiple drones is to be able to have the genetic variability. Yes, Jim?
Just as a bit of information, in Tarvia, state research, and the claims that's the record number of mating, 75 or 76.
That's and the some of the slides come from a gentleman who was one of the first people to do artificial insemination, and he took he took hundreds of drones and he mixed the semen and then was able to artificially inseminate from hundreds. So, but that was artificial, that wasn't natural. But I've not heard that from. Any questions about how I know 2 times 5 equals 10 is common sense math, but this is looking at it from a genetics perspective. You good? You guys? This is a good example of a phenotype. So notice the difference here. These 3 bees in the circles, the red circles, they have darker abdomens, as opposed to the bee in the middle has more of an orangish red color to her, orangish yellow. You can see in the picture with no circles over here, it's the same photo. But I use this as an example to show how even the same hive, because remember we talked about there's 10 possible choices, 10 possible offspring in that hive. So some of them can be dark in color and some of them can be lighter in color. And there have even been studies that suggest that in those 10 possible family groups, that worker bees will feed their full sisters before they will feed their half sisters, and that they will take care of future queens that are their full sisters as opposed to future queens that are their half sisters.
Just to comment, if I can clarify, one of the reasons, it's variable as to how many drones the queen mates with, is she will mate until her spermatica is full. So that could be after 10, or in some extreme cases, every 5.
I would like to know how Mr. Tarpey kept count on that. Yes.
So you mentioned that they feed some would feed their like full sisters as opposed to their half sisters first. I have a question about that. So do you want like a chemical composition like pheromone between them, or is it something more like, because I know like in ants, if there's a like fire ants, which we all love, when they start to calm down, they release a chemical to tell everybody kind of calm down. It's something similar, that there's just a slight bit of pheromone differences that they're picking up on.
It has to be pheromone communication, absolutely. So that they can identify, that a bee can identify her full sister versus her half sister is beyond our ability to comprehend. But we believe it is possible. Any questions about, what's the next one? Any questions about phenotypes specifically? So on this one, this is a little bit of a test, and you know what we're talking about, so this should be easy for some people. It's the same, here we go. So it's the same 3 cells. I want you to focus on these 3 cells. Jim, what do you see? Put you on the spot. Anybody want to guess what's going on? What is it? They're larvae, yes.
They're drone larvae.
They're drone larvae. They were laid in worker cells. I pulled this example from a laying worker, and so the worker, there was no queen present, so the worker never mated, obviously, because she wasn't supposed to lay eggs, but because there was no queen present, her pheromones preventing her from laying eggs were not blocked by a queen, so a laying worker ensued, and a worker bee laid an egg into a cell. And obviously, because she never mated, she can only lay drone eggs. And so this is an example where you can see this is all worker brood size-wise, but those are laid, they're trying to build them up taller, and you can see how much fatter they are than the ones around them. You can even see 2 eggs in some of those cells. So now I've opened up a whole Pandora's, yes.
Is that a preservation method for the hive?
Absolutely. This is when in doubt, when you have no other option left. And I've not personally seen where drones through this technique have been successful, but I have been on apiary inspections before where it was a drone laying call. It was a laying worker colony, and they had drones, and they were noticeably smaller. You could tell that they were drones because they had larger eyes, larger abdomens, but they were smaller than the ones in the cages. And assumably they have worse chances of reproducing, but at least they had some chance. So this is the last ditch. There is no other option left. And I hope that you never see this example in your hive. But if you do see it, this is one of those things that if you see it and
Get it
you'll,
clean.
huh?
Quickly get it clean.
Yeah, it's
It may be too late.
probably,
Once you got
could be
the
too
right
late, yeah.
workers.
But, I mean, there are techniques to fix the problem, but for the most part, it's, you know, it's a bad deal. This happened to be in a very small mating nuke where the queen just didn't make it back, and I didn't check on them in time, and so they started, but I mean, it's a little big box, so, yeah, it happens. Any questions about how this happens? Anything else? But it's important to understand that this is how a laying worker can happen. The workers can actually lay eggs if there is no queen present to prevent them from doing it. But again, they can only lay unfertilized eggs.
Say worst case scenario, could those drones actually be able to save the hive?
Well, they couldn't save the hive, but they could pass their genetics on to a different queen somewhere else, theoretically. So depends on what your definition of save the hive is. They can't, I mean, they're not saving that box, but some genetic material may escape if it's the best. But hopefully the queen that swarmed out in the first place is still somewhere else and she's doing okay. And, you know, it's a safety mechanism. That answer your question? Anybody else? This is a fake queen on the end of the stick, and those are drones chasing after the fake queen. Thought you guys might like to see that. This actually came from a video, so that you could actually see the drones chasing after. But there's a guy like he was in either an airplane or something. I can't remember how they did it, but they were high up and they found where the drones were congregating, and they had a fake queen, and they ran her through, and the drones started chasing them down. But you guys might enjoy that. These are the two websites that I got my primary information, my charts from, if anybody has any specific questions about that. And, you know, and obviously we can send out the slides. Any questions in general about drones, anything else?
Typically, how far will drones go to in pursuit of queen?
Drone congregation area is going to be 3 to 5 miles, I think is good. What's that?
They don't,
You don't think they go that far? What, 2 or 3 miles?
it's, so queen usually goes about a mile and a half, and drone goes a mile. That's the statistics that are in the hive. And if you were gonna take a message.
I'll defer to an expert. Yes, ma'am.
Isn't there a time of day that becomes more likely to go in search of a virgin queen?
I think better weather in general. I don't know about a time of day specifically. Somebody may contradict me on that, but I think why 2 o'clock? Greg?
I'm just telling you what's in books.
It's in the book. The book says 2 o'clock.
Well, I've seen at my apiary, I've had what I thought was a swarm, but it was a virgin queen going out to get mated. You know, she left and everybody tried to follow her. They all came back and, you know.
Worker bees on.
Yeah.
Which I have some theories about some bees going with the queen and then basically being able to bring her back so that she doesn't have to pay attention to how to get back home.
Well, at my place, it's unlikely she'll get back
I love drones.
because the dragonflies are so. vicious.
Dragonflies.
Well, could it be then that some of the workers go out with her to act kind of bodyguards or,
She doesn't care. She's going out to find those drones.
okay.
They think she's swarming again. You know. They'll pile out and then, you know, after a while, they all come back. You know.
Which she doesn't like them.
Huh?
Which she doesn't go out and like them.
Right. Yeah, she's out flying somewhere and they slowly come back in.
If they don't typically reform.
Because it's a mess and a half watching them come out, and then they get it organized somewhere else. I've caught queens coming out the front door before. That is nothing like putting in a brand new queen in the box and then coming back 2 days later and watching them boil out of, and you wait right there to catch her, hoping you catch her back too. And I've had them bowling around, and flying around, and I clap my hands together like I'm making thunder or something. And I watched her laying right there on the thing, and I said, okay, well, that's where you're going right there. And I put the cage over top of her, and I left her right there until they, oh, piled up on top of her. Put them back in the box. Anybody else? Al, I hope I didn't take up all your time.
You need to talk to Jose about the queens if they're laying drones. I no longer, I'm sorry, I didn't think about that queen that day though.
Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Have to start my presentation out here. Let's see. Find the mouse there. Let's show. Oh, that worked. Which is the top and bottom?
The laser goes up. It doesn't come out, but it's on top. That's it.
Whatever you want to change it.
Okay.
Keep doing that.
Get back to the beginning. Oh, that's the end. Any questions?
We do it fast here.
Am I gonna touch
Does everybody know who I am?
Alice out.
I'm out. I've been a member of the club since 2008. So I'm one of the long-time people, Jim Dempster. Let's see, Rich was here during then. I don't know which direction I'm going. I think either button seems to be changing. Is that sharing? It's not. You want to work on it? Yeah. So while he's working on the Zoom, so that the Zoom people can see it. See, somebody a long time ago said, you should always start with a joke. So I looked one up, and most of you are old enough to remember the group Monkeys, right? So this guy and his girlfriend were in a town where the Monkeys were going on tour, so his girlfriend said she wanted to go see them. He didn't think she was actually serious until, see, he was working in his bee yard, and they had plans to do that instead of the Monkeys. But whenever he looked at her face, now he's a believer. They have this all about believer. Believer. So that's my joke.
Where's your backup joke?
Beauty is in the eye, the beholder. So beekeepers have the most beautiful eyes. Okay, there we go. So. Okay. This is going to be discussed on using, it's mainly going to be important to the newest beekeepers, although I figure a lot of the people who've had them for 5, 10, 15 years, you probably figured out whether you want to use one brood chamber or 2 brood chambers. A brood chamber, and I'll define what brood chamber is in the later slide. But newer beekeepers are confused because they see all these parts to the beehive. Do I want 1 box, 2 boxes for the brood nest, for the raised brood, and then add honey supers up here, or 1 brood chamber, and then
Is a queen excluded, that type of thing. So I'm gonna talk about advantages, disadvantages. Everything has advantages, disadvantages. Bees really don't care what they live in. I've seen them in an empty gas tank with a tractor before. I told the guy, let's just leave them there, it's next to the woods. I'd rather not take that swarm away. They got drones, so. So, as far as I know, they're still down there between here and Benson. So, one of our considerations is how much room do you want for that brood chamber? And it's for, I'm giving this, we are hoping to upload it to YouTube, so anybody watching it, this is for Johnston County, North Carolina, which is eastern North Carolina. Your temperatures will vary, will cause us to vary about what you need. So, let's see, it doesn't want to change. Oh, there it goes. A brood chamber. What's a brood chamber? That it's usually most terminology is that's the first box that sits on your bottom board. So your brood chamber, you want it where workers coming back, first thing they encounter are, well, they'll encounter guard bees, but they'll bring in the fresh nectar and most importantly, pollen for your brood. Whenever you have the larva in there, the most nutrition to feed it, to turn it into a great worker, is that the quality of that pollen. So first thing you want is feeding the babies before you store any honey. So that's why the brood chamber's on the bottom. You want the queen in that bottom. So you can see all the bees. I'll have a laser for you. Let's see if I can tell you what's up. Get you more. Oops. Wrong direction. Brood chamber. Okay, the brood chamber allows the workers, which are the attendants, to attend to the queen. You can see some of the different queens we've had. Most of them like the one down there in the middle, with them around the circle. But most of mine are over the darker quality. There was one time I had a lighter orange one. You notice, you said you were new to beekeeping. Queen is big, she's got a big back end. And usually, even though her daughters may have stripes, a lot of times they don't have as many, their stripes aren't as pronounced. They use, most of them use the outside. And then over here, you can see the brood, the cells. And brood chamber, think of it as the nest. That's where all the life, the new babies. My finger hits both of us sometimes. Another thing with the brood chamber, we're going to use the terminology of a box. So that's technically what it is. It's got four sides. You can have brood chambers made out of plastic. Those are called egg. You can have a center. That egg is pretty much the size of a bee. You've got mediums. I don't know anybody that would keep these in several shallow stacks, but you can see the difference in size. That's what I'm going to concentrate on the bees and the mediums. And I did throw in what in Britain they use. It's a taller frame and a little narrower. So, because queens like to go up and down as they're laying eggs, typically. I've seen some go side to side, or they just go random. I don't know, maybe they're drunk or something. I don't know. So, with a single bee, and these are some considerations taken back with one bee, you only have the cost is cheaper to have your brood nest. It's better during the slow seasons because the queen will scale back on how many eggs she's laying per day based on the quality of the nectar coming in and the pollen. Remember, pollen is what, and the queen even knows, pollen is what makes the babies. It also allows easier location of queen. You've only got one box that she's in. It's less work to inspect the brood nest. If you're doing a row mite count, well, you may have 5 or 6 frames of brood. They're all in one box. That's the brood you want to test for growing. You want open brood. Disadvantages during the spring flow, because it's coming in so hard, that queen is laying as hard as she can. And when I took the class in 2008, I was taught 3,000 up to 3,000 eggs a day in the spring. Typically, once we get over the nectar flow, it's going to be maybe 1,200 to 1,400 a day. It all varies based on how much is coming in. Another disadvantage is you've got to use a queen excluder to keep her out of your honey stores. The little additional cost of a queen excluder, a metal one, will cost you maybe $11 to $12. Whereas another brood chamber will cost you, I usually tell people around $60 with frames and foundation. Plus they have to pull that wax.
Is that, you mean just like once the bottom box or bottom brood is like full, you just put another box on top and then.
Yes, and they will move up into it. Usually in my class, I tell people, when you see about 70% full and occupied, she's laying eggs and they're storing nectar in those cells. That's your cue to go get another box. That gives you about a week to get it ready. Within that week, they're probably filled with it's probably 80% by a week. It all depends on the weather and where you live. And then when you put that new box on there, hopefully there'll be so many bees that they'll easily be able to cover all that wax. Because their job is to protect it from being damaged by pests like your hive beetles, which hive beetles usually don't bother foundation. But if so many bees go up, try to make wax, they'll go down to the bottom and start riddling with your stored honey, your bee bread, things like that. Also, if you get distracted or you have emergencies come up and you can't keep check on them, you're likely to have swarms with a single brood chamber. And swarms may be an advantage or disadvantage. Some people love catching swarms. Some people are looking to grow their apiary. And you don't have to catch a swarm. You can do an inspection and say, okay, I see queen cells in here. I'm going to take a split, take that original queen out, make a new hive. That's still kind of a swarm. It's an artificial, you're forcing it. The downside to splitting or with swarms is you'll lose a lot of bees, the population. I don't think mine have ever lost half, but usually maybe about 25% to 30%. No, they swarm and to create a new colony. And so those are no longer available to collect honey for you.
So do they follow where you put the old queen in the new?
Well, if it's a swarm that actually goes without me doing anything, that queen exits and a certain amount of workers will follow her.
But if you physically put her in another box.
I also move frames.
Yeah, so they'll go with her, right?
The frames I'll move. Now, the ones I don't, they're not gonna go follow her. They don't care. They love where they're living. They're gonna keep making sure those queen cells hatch. At least one, they won't, at least one queen. Let's making sure I don't change the picture. Let's see. About swarms. I guess that's about it.
The
Nurse
trouble,
that you move with those frames will go into that hive.
With her, the
Right.
ones that are on that frame.
Yeah,
Stay
the nurse bees.
Yes.
If there's any worker bees, the ones that are going out and flying, they won't leave that hive. They'll go out into the hive and come back to the old.
Oh, they will go back to the.
Yeah.
They might,
the real issue here is when you
if you get nurse bees.
take that swarm tendency away by starting a new hive, you're gonna reduce the number of nurse bees in that original hive, and you pull brood and stuff away. So at some point, the number of bees will drop off, you know, because you pulled that brood away. And this other hive that you've started, it's gonna take them probably 2 generations, 42 days to build their hive back up where they can forage at the same level they were foraging at. So that's why, whether it's an actual swarm or a fake swarm, it still hurts.
Honey production.
Yeah.
But if you're only looking to grow your apiary, I have had issues where I lost all of them in one of my apiaries, except for one hive. And I run double deeps. And I was able to take that by the end of the fall, I had 8 hives back out there from that one hive. So that is your purpose of what is that apiary for? You have to keep that in mind. If you're wanting to collect honey, you want to leave them as populated as possible until the end of the nectar flow. So. Right. I mean, it's bad. Double deeps. Double deeps is just taking 2 levels.
Do you start out that way, or you, like I said, when you let the one and then you put the next box?
You start with 1 because I have seen people do 2, and that weakens their whole hive and they were starting with packages. So there's no drone comb. If you start with a nuke and you're in an 8-frame box, a 5-frame nuke into an 8-frame box, I'd say go ahead and add a second level and you'll be fine. So double D, there's less inspections required and less likely to swarm. I'd say 90% of my beehives, I do a full inspection maybe once every 90 days. But a lot of them are 20 miles from me, so I don't go out there. So my objective is to build them deep so that they're doing well. Nectar flow starts, I gotta take, and I do something I tell people not to do. So don't do it just because I do it. I put 2 medium supers in there because before I get down there again, they're gonna feel that if they're a good hive. So I'm telling you, don't do what I'm doing. Add 1 medium super at a time and collect honey. It also allows colony growth to be as large as possible because a commercial beekeeper we used to have in there, that's the next bullet point. She said that, and she actually grew up in a beekeeping commercial beekeeping family, that queen bees genetic disposition is to go up and down. She said 20 to 22 inches vertically, laying eggs. And if you put 2 deeps on top of each other, that gets you that amount of space. Now I've had some, and then one's in my backyard right now, 3 deeps on it. And I have eggs from bottom to top. Now I'm not wall to wall. They're storing the honey on the outside. So it's almost like a rainbow.
So you have 3 deeps that have brood in it?
Mm-hmm. But that's because that queen wants to go that high. I have others that the third deep on top is just honey. And so my opinion is that's more the disposition of the queen. What does she want to do? I don't use queen excluders. Now the one that has the 3, where the queen's in all 3, about 2 weeks, 3 weeks before I decide to take honey, I'm going to be putting the queen excluder in there. The hard part is queen excluders can be dangerous. I have gotten in a rush, couldn't find the queen, but most of the bees were down. She ended up in that top chamber instead of in the bottom 2. So when I went back, I had 2 deeps full of honey to harvest versus the 1 deep that I planned on. So it gave me more honey. It wasn't what I expected. Also, the double deeps are good for walkway splits. Like I said, sometimes my out apiary locations, something goes wrong. Either trees have grown and there's more shade, because more hive beetles, and I may lose a colony. I usually keep 3 to 4 hives in those out locations. I will just take an extra bottom board and the tops. set one off, put lids on it, and wherever the queens, as long as I've got eggs in both of them, I don't care. Queen can be in either one. We'll be good to go. The disadvantages, during the slow season, which can be late fall through early spring, you may need to reduce to one box, depending on how strong your colony is. My Italian bees, I don't have to reduce them. They seem to, Italians lay eggs all winter long. So you just have to observe and decide, do I need to take one away? Because they have to be able to cover all of that wax. The good thing, if it ever does freeze, is usually wax moths aren't much of a problem in the winter time. They are in fall. Queen's more difficult to locate in double games because you've got, instead of, I run 10 frame. So instead of 10 frames to go through, I gotta go through 20. Now, I don't have 20 frames in my hives. I have 18. I use a double wide feeder and I leave that year round. Whenever I'm creating a hive, that feeder goes with that hive and it stays there year round. Always in the top brood chamber. There's more work during the full inspection, meaning you've got to go all the way down. Instead, you're still going all the way down, but in the single, but there's only brood going to be looked at with 10 frames. Yes.
They're about how heavy is like a full.
With mine, I only lift one frame at a time.
So I say like a whole brood box, how heavy can it be? If we had to take off that top deep brood box to get to the bottom one, about how heavy?
Don't take it off.
No?
Don't take one frame at a time. Have a spare box and slip them and take one frame at a time and sit it into it. It's like the ring game with 3 poles. You can have a bigger ring on top of the ring.
Smarter, not harder. That's what I was-
80 pounds.
Well, it took me 3 years and every year it hurt my back to do that.
80 pounds.
He says 80 pounds. But it depends on how many drones are in there versus workers.
Yeah, frames of honey exposed to that.
So I don't recommend doing that. You'll hurt your back.
And you need a spare brood chamber, bottom board and top, in case you have a swarm, then you've got a place to put your swarm into.
Yep, already this year, I think I've had about 10 people call me on a day that I'm closed to come and get extra equipment because they've got a swarm. Luckily, I live a mile from the store, so I can go.
A cardboard box works well in an emergency, doesn't it, Larry?
Yeah.
So when they swarm, does that mean like there's an extra queen or something and they decide just to leave and things go with them? And then-
She may not have hatched at that point, but yes.
Just to clarify,
Uh-huh.
during that slow season, you have to have honey stores.
Correct.
So in the north, where I came from, you had 2 bees because you needed 60 pounds of honey. So we had to have 2 bees.
And
Down here, you don't need 2 bees, you may be able to stack honey supers up.
And I always leave 1 medium of honey on my hives year round, or in the fall. If they don't eat it by February, then in March, I'm extracting that honey. So I extract honey in March, and October, so 3 times a year. Now, granted, the honey I'm extracting in March is the prior fall's honey. It just, this year, because of weird weather, they ate it all. I didn't extract any honey in March. So that was fine with me. That's why that was there. Some people call that emergencies.
If it swarms, how do you make it go into the other box? You have to-
You catch it. You find the queen.
A lot of times, if you find the actual swarm, you can bump it in the top of the box. You can spray it with sugar water to keep them Well, he's an expert.
That's what I say, grape sugar water, and then it's.
And then just bump them into the box. And if the queen's in there, they're gonna fan and tell everybody, hey, look, the queen's here, come here. And,
And that's just gonna start a whole new box.
new hive.
Sounds like next month, Jim, swarming. I know we already had swarming in like March.
Greg, any comments? Well, maybe we get Greg to come talk about the swarm catching then.
I've done a lot of,
Well, first time I met him, I went to buy 12 bees from him. I counted them, it was 13. He said, oh, well, that's a free bee.
That, you should level that. That was like fair.
Okay, so I was also reminded, and I actually had my hive configuration this way my first year of beekeeping. It's called hive and a half, or whatever you want to call it, 1.5. Deep. It's basically you take your deep, once it's ready and you feel like they need to expand like 70–80%. We'll then use a medium super to just expand the brood chamber by what is it, around 6.5, 6, 7, 8, 7 inches. You're about 7 inches. That's what you're doing. And then you can put queen excluder above that to plate your honey. Because that's not your 22 inches or 20 inches. So that queen will still, if you put another medium up there, the queen will probably go into that second medium. So this is the configuration I used the first year I kept bees. Part of it was cost, because back then mediums were probably half the price of deeps. Where I was buying. Now they're not. They're pretty much $1 less than deeps. So it was cost back then. I was so cheap. I just bought the bell. I mean, I think I bought gloves, bell and gloves. And went to Goodwill, bought long sleeve shirt that was pretty thick, and go for it. So the advantages to it, it's kind of a mix and match of the single and double. There's less inspections that needed. That's needed. Than the single box, but they still may swarm. And that year I did have one of the two, I started with two loops. One of them swarmed. So I ended up with 3 at fall. It may satisfy the queen with her desire up and down. Some queens may only want to lay 10 inches, 12 inches, 13 inches. It's also good for walkaway splits, because Ron's not here tonight, but Ron likes mediums. So you make sure there's eggs in the medium and the deep. You have a bottom, take the medium off, put it on the bottom board, put the top on it. Make sure there's eggs in both of them. And you won't care where the queen is, because one or the other will make a queen. Also good news for the cooler seasons, smaller colonies.
Could that be done with 2 deeps, like just split the
Yes.
hive and do like that?
Yeah, I guess I didn't.
He said walk in.
Okay, four places. So, and now Ron, he runs all of his as mediums too. And remember, it takes 2 mediums to pretty much equal the height of the deep. So, I reiterate, bees don't care where you're keeping them, as long as they're able to defend it from pests. Disadvantages, the queen is still more difficult to find because there are 2 boxes you got to answer, just as many frames. The queen exclusion is required when you have your honey supers. It is more expensive than a single box. Like I said, the mediums are really only like $1. The box is cheaper, $1 cheaper. The frames are the same price. And instructions for bromide treatment may vary. It may say to use 1 per hive body where the brood is at. Well, then you start saying, well, I've got more than a hive body, and they say for two, use this much. And so you may have to kind of go halfway between what it says for a 1D and a 2D. Because you don't want it to be too weak that it's not gonna take care of the growth light.
I think you should tell them why Ron likes the.
Hey, Ron had told me.
Oh, you don't know? They're lighter.
He lifts the whole box.
Yeah.
You understand, Ron's got like 200 hives. He,
We were talking around last week.
yeah, pollinates Wilson County and Johnston County. He's, yeah.
The boxes are lighter when they're full. And if you're getting young.
Even a medium's still heavy. I've hurt my back on mediums.
Totally.
So I recommend pulling one frame at a time.
And I'll make a comment here. When you go to pull off a box, a lot of times, you got plastic frames. You might not just be lifting that medium, you might be lifting all the frames underneath. Because the bees have glued the two together. Excuse me.
That's why that's the heck tool, one that's coming from both sides.
Yeah.
There's also something called foam saws. That if the honeycomb is wet, or if they go between there, built bridges, you can use the thumb saws to saw between it. You loosen the outside and you saw it, you're not destroying as much of that comb. Then when you set it back.
But if you do, like you say, pull the frames, if you pull each individual frame, you get around it, them gluing them together.
Yeah. On the left is a single brood box. It's got a queen excluder between it and the blue deep that's on top. They're just collecting honey in the deep that's on top. The one on the right is the double brood chamber. And that's because one colony was a weaker colony, and maybe earlier in the season, that was a one we split. Beekeeping is art. You're the artist. You can decide how you want to raise your bees. What's your purpose? If you want to collect honey, build it big. Get your colony strong before the nectar flow in spring. After the nectar flow, go ahead and do splits if you're wanting to expand your apiary or whatever. Which most of the time when I do my splits is in July. Seems to work best for me. You can do single, double, or half and a half. Like I say, try various configurations. See which ones you like. My favorite is the double D. It seems to work for me. And so the bees don't care where they live. So your main concerns is you're trying to balance, you want enough space in the brood box for the queen to lay eggs and the colony to survive winter time. Because spring is when the nectar flow. Queens lay an average of 1,200 to 1,400 a day, means roughly 13 to 14 frames are required. In addition, you've got worker bee eggs, and then some are drone eggs, and many cells are needed for the pollen. So if they're stored in pollen stores, I've had a peanut field near one of mine. They completely filled the bottom deep with peanut pollen into all 10 frames. Now, in the springtime when that came, I didn't do a box reversal or anything. That was probably the strongest hive I've ever had. And I wouldn't have thought it, but I had to trudge across the field because when I put it out there, there was actually a little road. The farmer, without telling me, plowed up the road and everything to plant peanuts.
Question now, when to start a brand new hive, when is the best time to do that?
Tomorrow.
If you're starting from the really anytime from probably March through June. After solstice, June 20th, 21st, whatever it is, it's sometimes difficult to get a colony to pull wax. Now, if you already have pre-existing other colonies, you can pull some frames from them, things like that. But a nuke is probably the easiest way to go for a beginner. Packages, I've had success with packages I've gotten, it was about the end of May, I got something very cool. They did great, I had to feed them. That first year, they filled my bottom box. And I had a queen excluder, collected probably a medium super of honey. And I took the queen excluder out, and that was their food for that winter. That's when I realized I can leave honey on, and if the winter's not too bad, and a bad winter isn't cold, a bad winter is warm. So that queen is laying eggs, but there's no flowers. They eat that honey. So my favorite winters would be if we could get 20 to 30 degree days. And the power bill would be terrible, but the bees would be great. So you could still start a hive this time of year if you buy a nuke. I would recommend a nuke for any beginner, whether you start now or if you wait until spring next year.
And there's a lot of local people in this club that sell nukes. So Greg's one, Al's one, Ron's one. You can get good nukes from local people. There's all sorts of people.
Oh yeah, never order a nuke. And I wouldn't drive over 50 miles probably. So if you team up with the right buddy, they may even give you a few frames to start. Sometimes they require you to, sometimes they want you to come help them in their area before they would do that. It's almost like, yes, and it's sort of like pay. I don't say it's paying.
They actually care about the bees enough to come do it.
Right. One of our members, named Ricky Beasley, he used to mentor a different teenager every summer. And if that teenager helped and stayed with it from the spring until the fall, a Christmas gift to him was he would take the hive of bees. So it's kind of passing on. You don't put too much space below the queen excluder, or they will store honey in there and they can cause to be honey bound, which is bad. The queen with honey plays 20 eggs. So, you know, you may have questions. We've answered questions all along.
All right, wait till the end.
You can't wait till then, because understand.
Got a question. Should they buy used equipment?
If you buy, there's nothing wrong with used equipment if you know what you're looking at. Now, if somebody's telling you they'll sell you the complete used equipment, had a die out and it just died out, but everything looked good and they want to sell it to you for $130. I sell a complete hive kit for $149. So why would you pay $10 less for one that's used? A lot of people are doing that. I've seen time and time again, selling their equipment at almost what I'm selling brand new equipment for.
So where's your store?
Sherman's supposed to be for us. So, and then there's the Pony Creek up the road where Greg lives. There's Midnight Bee Supply down in Bass.
Bailey?
Bailey. I was trying to go further and further. So Pony's the closest, then Bass, then Hillsborough.
And I buy from everybody but Safoni. I just haven't gone up there, but you know, different people have different things. And when you need something on short notice, you get it where you can get it.
Fun fact, even Tractor Supply does also carry some bee supplies.
They do, yes.
I can give you the price.
So that's the actual last thing.
Amazon, that's one of the options.
Yeah, I actually got my beehive kit from there.
I can't beat their prices, but mine are American made, they're Chinese.
Yeah, but they're not gonna come unless they have a question when they're gonna pick it up from the store. Amazon people are just gonna take a picture of it on the doorstep, so I'm not gonna ask for something I pick up. So.
A word of warning about some of the stuff coming off Amazon. Some of the frames aren't nailed very well, and you will get your top bar coming off, and it's a mess.
Well, actually, my frames were not nailed or nailed at all, so I put them all together myself.
Well, I understand that some of them come assembled.
Yeah,
And what I'm saying is, they'll just put one nail down the center, and they won't put one into the sides, so when you pry up, the top bar comes off, the rest of the frame stays there, and you got a mess.
So is there a happy plan somewhere on making them yourself?
You get, yep. There's plenty of free plans.
Just check the, just Google it.
Google it?
yeah, YouTube has plenty of.
You got a saw?
Yes. Well, it's not ours, but we've been,
My
it's
advice,
mechanics, it's been putting together somebody's actually for the sawmill, so we built some trees, and so he's been cutting.
There's plenty of free plans
And
out there.
so I was like, we can come.
If you have my E-class, it actually, I hand out plans and make your own
And so when are you teaching that again?
next spring.
Really?
This whole house is saying, my body.
Okay.
it's not worth building your own frames, I'll flat out tell you. There ain't no way it's worth your time.
I just wanted to use the trees we saw down with the sawmill. So.
Find some better use for them, but making frames, man-made,
Man, it's hard to find it.
Well, there's some called B-space that you have to be careful of too.
What?
There's something called B-space, it's 3/8 of an inch. That's where the bees need to walk through. So if your frame's just slightly off, you got 10 of them, it makes it way off. And so they'll either build extra wax or progress, depending on if it's more space or less space, then they can walk through. That's the comment.
That's what I was talking
Okay.
about.
No questions? Ready, John?
I'm ready. Changing the subject. We would like to increase the membership fees effective July 1st to $15 for individuals and $20 for families to bring us more in line with Wilson County and 5 counties. The board would like to get your approval to do that. In addition to that, we decided to buy a point of sale device. And Adam tells us that we can set it up where we can do online membership, and that will bring us into line with what Wilson County and 5 counties does, and it will eliminate a lot of administrative headaches. So I propose that we raise membership fees. Will anybody second that? Okay,
Starting with,
July 1st,
for next year.
this year. Well, for anything, if you're a new member starting this year, after July 1st, you're gonna pay the increased fee. Okay. Okay. Everybody that's actually a member right now, if you're for this, please raise your hand. Anybody opposed? Jason, okay.
January 1st, I was on January 1st. But I knew it was gonna pass anyway, so. Nobody always
There's always one.
Well, at least we know we have our normal field per distribution now. Okay, speaking of membership, if you haven't renewed your membership, you need to. Our vice president back there is standing by, ready to take your money and help you fill out the application. Okay, horizontal handicap hive project. Did everybody see the poster when you came in? Anyway, we're hoping they're gonna pour concrete this, this week, but the weather may have delayed it. But this is gonna be quite a thing for the club. We'll have a horizontal handicap hive, and we're also gonna have an 8-frame hive up there, and this is for the 4-H members, for people that are wheelchair bound, older members who can't handle those medium supers, and just be able to handle frames. We think it's just gonna be a good learning tool, and the Ag Center is putting a lot of resources into this area over here near the staff parking lot between 210 and the driveway up to the staff parking lot. It's gonna really be nice. So this is something there behind. We could use volunteers for Bee Basics. Anybody want to volunteer to see me? If you have a topic you want to cover, suggest it. I'm open. Next big project coming our way is Summer Fun for 4-H, June 15th. Anybody want to volunteer for that, come see me after the meeting. We're posting items to Facebook. Adam's done a good job of doing that. I'll send it over to him. If you think something needs to be posted, get with myself or one of the board members and let them know, and we'll try to get it over to Facebook. Does anybody have any other club business they want to talk about? Jose, could you give us an update on our technology project? Maybe a little bit on April?
So, towards the beginning of the year, we started taking a look at including some sensors in our apiary. So, sensors can include things like hive scales, so that's just a scale that's underneath the hive, and track the weight within the hive. But they also include other things like in-hive sensors. So, for example, what we decided to go with is a company called Broodminder.
Can you come up to the front so you're on the Zoom? Oh, sure.
So we did a little bit of research and we found that there's a company named Broodminder that produces a number of different types of sensors, including scales that sit underneath the hive and internal sensors that measure things like temperature and humidity. And they also have opened up their ecosystem to allow other companies that produce different types of sensors to integrate into their website so that a club or even members can go in and have one place where they can look at all sorts of data that they're collecting about their hives. So the club has created an account where we're going to create and have created our apiary with our hives. We're going to choose 2 hives where we're going to actually place the sensors, but we're going to track all of the information for all of our hives within this website. Now, probably in the next couple of meetings, we're going to try to do a presentation of the sensors, which will include some of the information that we've gathered on those 2 hives. And what we'll do at that point is give you information about how you can go to Broodminder, create a free account so that you can also include your hives, but so that we as a club can share our apiary information with you, so that when you log into your account, you'll actually have one side, a link that will take you to the apiary information for the club, where you can see the sensor data, you can see notes that we've included in there, and you can kind of have a look into how the club is managing our apiary. Now, I don't know if we'll ever get to a point where we have sensors in every hive, but we figure we'd start with a pair of hives, just the way that we often tell beginners to start with 2 hives, so you can have 2 hives to compare and contrast.
Anything else on the apiary you want to report?
So
Up to 12 hives now?
that's right. So we kind of negotiated number of hives that we're allowed to keep on the Ag Center compound, and that number is 12, and we're at that number right now. We had a couple of hives swarm out, a couple dwindled down, so we ended up combining them. So we dropped down below, I think 9, probably 2 months ago, but now we're back up to 12. And they're looking pretty strong. I think was maybe last week, we went into a couple of hives, introduced new queens. And we checked on one of the hives, and the queen is about out of her cage. We're letting the bees take the candy out of her cage to let her get acclimated and let the workers acclimate to her. But yeah, we're doing pretty good, I think.
We'll get one new we're gonna do next weekend.
Yep, so this coming week's inspection, we've got a couple of things we need to accomplish. One thing is we've got a hive that is not really on a hive stand. We just kind of tossed a couple of bricks and a couple of pieces of wood because we didn't have enough hive stands. So now we've got a pile of cinder block that we're going to use to create a hive stand, because we've got all sorts of hive stands. We've got stuff that we built with 4x4, some 2x4. We've got these ultimate plastic hives that are hive stands that are pretty fancy. And now we're just going to do an example of what you can do with cinder block. So we'll need to take that hive and put it on cinder block. We also have a nuke that we need to put out into a deep body to help them, because they're starting to burst out that small, nuke box is usually only 5 frames. And they're starting to bust out of that 5-frame box. So we need to put them into a 10-frame box, give them a little more room to grow. I think that's about it. John?
Thank you. I've been reminded that the auction's gonna close here very shortly. So why don't we, take a minute and, while they're doing that, I want to make a couple comments about Beekeepers Corner. You got about 2 or 3 weeks to make your, honey crop. It's still swarm season. Don't let your hives become honey bound. Mite checks, you need to do mite checks. Find out where you're at in mites. You're running out of time to treat. Full honey supers need to start coming off and get extracted or in the freezer. You're running out of time to get drawn comb done. They still got a good nectar flow going on, so if you need them to draw it, you need to get that comb on there. And drift watch, don't forget about drift watch. Renew your hives. If y'all saw my apiary report, that was the last one for me. Jose's running the apiary now. He's in charge. So, you got any comments? That's the man you need to see. I'll help him any way I can though. And I'll be out there every weekend to answer questions and especially eat ice cream. Okay, let's do door prizes.